The crowd didn't wait for introductions. They chanted for the Bobcat, and Richard Reeves felt the floor give way beneath him.
This female, Bobcat, uses that exact path daily. If you build here, she's cut off from her den.
This is a wildlife corridor, not empty land. You're shredding a migration route older than this town.
I never saw this report. How did it get buried? It's like they kept it from me.
David Morrow was at his elbow, face hard with concern.
Don't panic. We'll hire our own biologist. Cast doubt. This is survivable.
Within the hour, David pulled him into a side office. The investors were already waiting.
Fight this, Richard. Or we find a new lead developer. Tonight.
Later, alone in his office, Richard stared at the photo of his daughter. He spread the wildlife report on the desk. The Bobcat's path cut a clean line through his blueprints. Sleep didn't come.
We've hired our own biologist. He'll testify the corridor data is fragmented. No reason to redesign. You'll present him at the next hearing.
That's not true, David. The GPS track is unmistakable. I can't stand up there and...
You can and you will. The board voted. This is business, not a nature documentary.
That night, Richard sat in his dark office, paging through the wildlife report again. The Bobcat's path was a bright thread through satellite images he'd ignored for months. He spread the trail camera photos across the desk. The Bobcat stared back, amber eyes catching the lamp's glow, indifferent to his crisis. Before first light, he was driving to the site. The half-cleared lots lay silent under a pale sky. Construction markers like frozen sentinels. He walked past the stakes marking the future road, his footsteps the only sound. At the old oak, he stopped and checked the trail camera. The small screen lit up. The last capture, 5:12 a.m. The Bobcat, mid-stride, crossing the exact route of his proposed main road. For a full minute, he just stared at the image. Then, he pulled out his phone, scrolled to Dr. Keene's contact, and let it ring.
If she picks up, there's no going back. David will call it betrayal, but I can't unsee this.
Dr. Sarah Keene picked up before the third ring, her voice as guarded as her research.
Mr. Reeves, after that hearing, I didn't think I'd hear from you.
I saw the Bobcat on my own trail cam this morning. That path is undeniable. I need you to track it.
You want me to work against your own company? What's the catch?
No catch. I'll cover the costs out of my own pocket. If the board refuses, I just need the truth.
Before Sarah could answer, Richard's phone buzzed. David Morrow, gunning the board's line.
I am hearing you are colluding with the opposition. Cancel it now or I'll move to remove you.
You'll have to move then, David. I am not burying this.
Sarah watched Richard end the call. She'd seen developers fold before. This one held steady. 2 hours later, the Bobcat slipped through the underbrush, wearing a new GPS collar. A fresh dot blinked on Sarah's laptop. A week's worth of GPS data layered across Richard's subdivision map made the truth unmissable.
She crosses here, here, and here, right through your proposed main road, and 3 residential lots.
That's impossible to work around. Half the site plan would have to shift.
What about an underpass? We can put a culvert under the road. Keep the lots.
An underpass won't work. Bobcats avoid enclosed spaces. She needs an open corridor.
So we'd need to leave a continuous strip of land untouched. A green belt through the middle?
That's insane, Richard. You'd lose a dozen homes. The investors will crucify us.
The data is unequivocal. If you disrupt her path, she'll abandon the area entirely.
This isn't a negotiation. The Bobcat won't compromise. If we're building, we redesign around her.
That night, Richard sat alone with the master plan and a fresh pencil, tracing the green line that now dominated everything. By morning, Richard and Sarah spread a rough site plan across his drafting table. Clustering homes around the corridor seemed possible until the cost estimates hit.
Even with density bonuses, we're short 12 home sites. That's a $2 million hole in the revenue.
Then we find savings everywhere else. Reduce road widths. Switch to shared driveways. I'll review every line.
By Thursday, The preliminary budget landed on David's desk. Within an hour, he'd called an emergency investor meeting.
I'll let Richard explain why our profit margin just evaporated.
This is the only design that preserves the Bobcat corridor and keeps the project alive. It costs more upfront, but it's the right path.
Or it bankrupts us. What guarantees do you have that buyers want a wild animal in their backyard?
A senior investor set his checkbook on the table with a soft thud.
Give me 1 week. Let me find a way to close that gap. If I can't, I'll step aside.
The room fell silent. After a long pause, the investor slid his checkbook back. 1 week, no more. Over the next 2 days, Sarah ran every iteration of David's tunnel proposal. Each simulation showed the Bobcat refusing to enter.
We can line it with brush, make it feel open. There has to be a way to make a tunnel work.
I modeled your brush lining. The Bobcat still veers off. She needs continuous sky view. A tunnel is a dead end.
While they argued, the local paper ran the headline, "Developer versus Bobcat." Lena's coalition reformed on the City Hall steps, louder than before.
We're not backing down. This corridor belongs to the Bobcat, not your profit sheets.
That evening, Richard's phone buzzed. His daughter's name glowed on the screen.
No, baby. I am not the bad guy. I am trying to save something important. It just looks worse before it gets better. Now my own kid sees me as the villain. I have to find something solid, or this whole gamble fails.
Desperate, he dived into market research from other regions. A study caught his eye. Homes bordering green corridors sold 17% faster at a premium.
That data is from Colorado. Our buyers will hear Bobcat and run. You are grasping at straws.
The next day, Richard called a smaller investor circle. He projected the Colorado data alongside a bold new vision, a community built around a living green spine.
Homes bordering green belts sell at a premium. This isn't a loss. It's a market differentiator.
Show me a buyer who wants a Bobcat, not a deer. This is a gamble, not a strategy.
A younger investor from Greenfield Capital slid his glasses up. He asked if Richard had tested actual buyer sentiment.
Not yet, but I am proposing a full marketing study. Let real buyers tell us what they want.
The Greenfield investor nodded slowly. He'd consider backing the project if the study proved demand. And only then, within hours, Sarah and Richard briefed a consumer research firm. They designed test concepts framing the corridor as a rare, natural amenity. In a focus group room that afternoon, they showed participants mock-ups of homes backing onto a wildflower corridor, a bobcat silhouette tastefully in the corner.
If the data comes back positive, we have a weapon. If not, tomorrow, I pack my office.
The marketing study was commissioned, but the clock still ticked. The Bobcat's path had 3 days to prove it could sell. The study results arrived in 2 days. 72% of target buyers would pay a premium for a wildlife corridor home.
72%. That's not a niche, that's a mandate.
The marketing team christened it the Preserve at Bobcat Crossing, branding the exact GPS path as a luxury amenity. They unveiled the banner, Bobcat silhouette, greenbelt, the name in serif, and the investors leaned in.
You are turning a PR disaster into a logo. I just hope the buyers believe it.
Richard and Sarah presented the full financial model. With the corridor as a premium amenity, projected margins actually exceeded the original plan.
The numbers check out. But if this fails, Richard, it's on you.
The board voted to proceed, provided Richard signed a personal guarantee for the corridor's construction.
My home, my savings, all of it bound to a Bobcat's path. But it's the only honest move left.
They still needed planning board approval. But now Richard had a brand, a team, and everything to lose. In the planning board chamber, Richard and Sarah spread the new master plan across the petitioner's table. Arthur Vance's gavel lay resting, his eyes unreadable.
Mr. Reeves, this board remembers the hearing. What's changed besides a new logo?
We've mapped her exact path. This corridor follows every documented waypoint, open, connected, untouched by asphalt.
I fought this project, but Richard offered his own money to get the science right. Our coalition supports this plan.
An uneasy murmur rippled through the chamber. The opposition had become the project's loudest ally.
Dr. Keene, your wildlife passage plan includes construction protocols.
Silent fencing, night work bans, and a zero disturbance zone during any GPS-tagged activity. We'll monitor daily.
This board grants conditional approval. Break the corridor promise, and this permit is void.
The stamp came down with a thud. The Bobcat's path, once a weapon used against him, was now the condition defining his project. As the gallery emptied, Richard stayed seated, staring at the blueprint. The green line now bound him legally. Within a week, crews broke ground on the corridor first. Richard walked the line every morning, watching native grasses take root.
She's holding steady. Look, the GPS dot follows the corridor exactly.
It's working. The gamble might actually pay off.
For 2 weeks, the Bobcat kept her routine, crossing at dawn and dusk. Richard allowed himself a sliver of hope. Then the bulldozers moved within 60 yards of the corridor's edge. Overnight, the GPS plot shifted north. Sarah pulled up the data, her face pale in the screen's glow. The Bobcat was now avoiding the corridor at dusk, skirting the property line.
Noise is spooking her. If she leaves for good, the whole promise collapses.
This is the first avoidance pattern. If we don't reduce disturbance, she'll shift her den permanently.
Then we reduce it. Pull the heavy equipment back to the south end. I'll talk to the foreman.
The relief of the first weeks evaporated. Richard stared at the diverted dot, the green line on his map suddenly fragile. By the 4th day, the GPS told an unmistakable story. The Bobcat no longer touched the corridor. She was crossing the county road in full dark, half a mile from any protection.
Every low-frequency pass of the bulldozers registers as a threat. She's abandoned the corridor completely.
Richard called a meeting in the site trailer. The whiteboard still showed the original schedule, every phase dependent on moving dirt.
We can't stop. Spring is our sales window. Push through. If she comes back later, we sell it as a miracle.
I saw her on that trail cam before dawn. This whole promise started there. If I break it now, the preserve is just a logo. Number. We halt all heavy work within 100 yards of the corridor, effective immediately.
You are risking everything. The project, your home, your name. The board will bury you.
I know, but I won't be the one who buried this path.
Within the hour, Richard stood on the dirt track and raised his hand. The bulldozers cut their engines. That evening, the corridor lay silent, a strip of unmown grass and young saplings, waiting for the Bobcat to trust it again. The halt triggered penalty clauses instantly. 500,000 in liquidated damages and a daily fine until work resumed.
500,000. Gone before we've laid a foundation. Your principles are bleeding us dry.
The cancellations came next. 3 pre-sale buyers withdrew within a week, citing construction uncertainty.
My name, my savings, my daughter's future, it's all draining into this corridor. But the moment I push ahead, I lose the one thing keeping this real.
He authorized Sarah to reinforce the corridor with native thickets and silent water stations, anything to coax the Bobcat back.
We're planting deer brush and rabbit cover. If prey returns, she'll follow. But nothing is guaranteed.
Richard gave up millions to save this corridor. If that's not accountability, I don't know what is.
But the headlines couldn't stop the accounting. Each silent day on the GPS monitor added to a debt no goodwill could cover. By the end of the 4th week, Sarah had checked every trail cam. The Bobcat had not passed. Richard sat in the darkened trailer, staring at the blank datasheet, the silence more damning than any accusation. David's call came before sunrise, an emergency board vote to permanently remove the corridor and pave over the path, tomorrow at noon.
I've called the vote for noon tomorrow. The board will decide to reclaim those lots.
Richard didn't argue. He drove to the site and walked the corridor at dusk, the silence absolute. Near the old oak, the mud gave way to a fresh paw print, a bobcat's, unmistakable.
She passed through last night. If I can prove it, Maybe I can stall the vote.
He took a photo and ran to Sarah's field station, his heart pounding. Sarah opened the trail cam data. The Bobcat, 4:47 a.m., padding along the corridor's edge.
One pass doesn't prove a pattern, but it proves she hasn't fled entirely.
It's enough to make them hesitate. I have to show them before the vote.
He grabbed the printed image and rushed out, the paw print's shape still glowing on his phone. Richard pushed through the boardroom door, the trail cam printout clutched in his hand.
This meeting is already in session. What's the meaning of this intrusion?
She came back. The Bobcat walked the corridor at dawn. Look at this.
He projected the image onto the screen. The Bobcat, mid-stride, bathed in early light.
That proves nothing. One pass after weeks of silence isn't a corridor. It's a fluke.
Then give me the time to prove it's not. Pave now, and the preserve becomes a joke.
The room fell still. The Greenfield investor finally set down his pen. He spoke. If Richard could provide consistent GPS data for 2 months, he'd cover the halt costs.
2 months is fair. We'll deliver daily tracking. I'll stake my word on it.
David shook his head but said nothing. The vote to remove the corridor was tabled, conditionally. That night, Richard and Sarah reconfigured the field station as a full-time monitoring post. Cameras on every approach. The GPS feed never closed.
Day 2 and 3, nothing. But on day 4, she crossed at 3 a.m. It's a start.
She's testing us. Every night without her is a loan payment I can't afford. But I can't rush this.
By the 3rd week, the dots on Sarah's map had tightened into a ribbon. The Bobcat now walked the corridor every 2 days, then every day.
She's using it like before. Same route, same timing. The corridor is her path again.
David watched the daily summaries from a distance. His silence is longer than any argument. On the 60th day, they printed the final GPS log. The Bobcat had used the corridor on 56 mornings.
56 out of 60. That's a 93% use rate. No biologist would dispute a permanent corridor.
Send it to Greenfield Capital. This corridor isn't a liability anymore. It's the foundation.
The attachment went through. Richard leaned back in the field chair, the weariness of weeks finally easing. Within days, construction resumed under the full protection protocols. The green corridor rose first, a living spine threaded between rising frames. The marketing campaign launched with a tagline that would soon become known, "Where the Wild Comes Home." On the first sales weekend, lines formed outside the model homes. Agents had never seen such demand for a project that had nearly died. Inside, the sales agent handed Richard a sheet. The first release, 18 homes, had all been reserved before noon.
All of them? That fast?
The buyers were clear. The Bobcat Trail was the deciding factor. They wanted a backyard that opened onto a living corridor. By Monday, the waiting list had 27 names, a newly completed home appraised 23% above projection.
I thought you'd bankrupt us.
You weren't alone. But the market just told us doing right is good business.
The preserve at Bobcat Crossing was no longer a gamble. It was the fastest-selling community in the region. Phase 1 was gone. The Sunday paper ran the headline, "How a Bobcat Saved a Neighborhood." Richard's photo appeared below, not as the villain, but as the man who listened. National outlets followed. A morning show ran a segment titled, "Where the Wild Comes Home," interviewing Richard beside the green corridor.
I called him the profit machine. Now I call him the man who bet his home on a wildcat. That's the developer we need.
Residents had already nicknamed the Bobcat Cedar. Her image hung in the model home office, a silent partner in the project's success. A 30-second clip of Cedar trotting the path at dawn spread across social media. Within days, number Bobcat Crossing trended, drawing millions of views. The marketing team barely had to spend. Traffic was 80% organic. The story was the campaign.
They're calling me a conservation hero. I just followed the cat.
At a community event, Lena Torres shook Richard's hand in front of a banner for the preserve. Their feud had become the project's greatest asset. The Where the Wild Comes Home campaign hadn't just sold homes. It had reshaped Richard's entire reputation. In real estate circles, the preserve was now a case study whispered at every conference. Yet the biggest recognition still hung in the balance. At the National Planning Conference, the MC opened the envelope. The Sustainable Development Innovation Award goes to Richard Reeves and the preserve at Bobcat Crossing.
This isn't mine alone. Dr. Sarah Keene tracked every step. Please, come up.
Sarah climbed the steps, a quiet smile on her face. The crowd gave her a second ovation.
And I need to acknowledge our real co-designer, the Bobcat herself. She drew the green line. We just built around it.
The hall fell silent for a beat, then broke into applause. The plaque read, "For redefining development as an act of coexistence." Under the stage lights, its gold lettering caught every eye. After the ceremony, David Morrow found Richard by the reception table. His usual sharpness was absent.
You were right. I had the spreadsheets. You had the cat. Turns out the cat was the better market analyst.
That's as close to an apology as David Morrow will ever get. And it's enough.
By the next morning, 3 other developers had emailed requests to tour the corridor. They wanted to learn the model. Within a month, 2 regional developers broke ground on their own corridor projects, using Richard's protocol as the blueprint. His firm launched a conservation planning division. The waiting list for consultations stretched 6 months. One morning, Sarah's GPS data flagged a cluster of new points. 3 pings, not 1. The trail cam confirmed it. Cedar had given birth. 2 cubs trotted along the exact path Richard had fought to save. The news spread through the neighborhood, like a holiday. Families gathered at back fences to catch a glimpse of the cubs. Sarah stood at the field station window, watching the GPS dots move in a tight, familiar line. Richard filed a permanent conservation easement that week, locking the corridor into law. From that day forward, the green ribbon was an unalterable piece of the landscape.
We didn't just build homes. We built a future where a wild cat and a kid's backyard share the same view.
The Bobcat, who had once been a protest sign, was now a symbol of what happens when developers listen. 1 year after the first sale, the neighborhood threw a Bobcat Fest along the corridor. Banners, with Cedar's silhouette hung from the oaks, families walked the trail where bulldozers once idled. Children pointed at the wildflower blooms that marked the Bobcat's daily route. Sarah Keene led a nature walk, stopping to lift a GPS antenna to explain how the corridor worked. Lena Torres walked beside her.
Every flower you see is here because the Bobcat chose this route first. We just protected what she already knew.
At the central gathering spot, Richard Reeves stood near the preserve at Bobcat Crossing, banner looking out at the crowd.
A year ago, this path was almost asphalt. I want to thank this community for believing in the wild line.
Families applauded. Children cheered. The sound carried down the corridor, as if the land itself was listening. Lena and Sarah exchanged a glance, then joined the applause. The woman who once protested and the scientist who once doubted stood as proof.
This is why we stopped the bulldozers. Not for the award, for this.
The Bobcat Fest became an annual tradition, the neighborhood's identity forever tied to the wild cat who drew the line. Late that evening, after the last banner came down, Richard walked the corridor alone. The celebration had faded to a soft hum behind him. His footsteps were the only sound. The same path he'd first seen on a trail cam years ago. Near the old oak, he stopped. The corridor ahead was empty. Then a shape separated from the shadows. Cedar stood in the middle of the path, her amber eyes catching the last light. Neither moved. For a long minute, there was only the quiet understanding between a man and a wild cat. Then she turned, unhurried, and padded into the brush. The leaves rustled once, then stilled. Richard exhaled, a quiet smile crossing his face. No cameras, no boardrooms, just the green line holding. He touched the bark of the oak, a silent thank you, then turned for home. The camera held on the empty corridor. the last light draining from the sky. Fade to black. The preserve at Bobcat Crossing became the highest-selling community in the region that year. Cedar the bobcat still uses her path every day. 2 cubs now at her side. Over 40 developments have since adopted wildlife corridor designs, each one tracing the green line she drew. From above, the subdivision looks like any other, except for that ribbon of wild threaded through the center. At dusk, the corridor glows with soft motion sensor lights, a safe passage through a human world. Families sleep on one side, the bobcat hunts on the other. The 2 worlds coexist because one man refused to pave over a paw print. The model proved that doing right doesn't just feel good, it builds value, and the wild line will remain, protected by law and kept alive by those who live beside it. The path belongs to her.